This is it's going to be a hard one to talk about.
Sort of a lonesome place out here, Pete. Unless you get in the swing of things.
And today we have The Power of the Dog. Normally I should do more, but time constraints. Normally I don't do movie reviews for Netflix films, but given the circumstances of being nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture, and two, because I did get the chance to see this in an actual theater that was playing the Academy Award nominees and whatnot, I thought, you know what? I haven't seen this yet. I've been putting it off. What better way to experience it for the first time than in a theatrical setting? So that's why I'm doing this. I'm trying to get a showing of Coda in before the awards, but because I've almost seen every film so far for the Oscars this year. But this is one from the bingo card. So Power of the Dog came out in 2021. You probably would have seen a trailer or two on Netflix. It definitely was trending in the top 10 for at least a couple weeks, I think. But it's got a stacked cast, mainly like a core cast of a few people, but as always, top down. So the director of this one is a Jane Campion? I'm not sure how to say it. Again, great research, stellar, I know. But Jane, she directed this. What you might know her from in terms of like directorial in the past, she has a large filmography, as a lot of people do, in terms of like writing and producing, directing stuff. But the most memorable stuff, Portrait of a Lady, not to be confused with Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Funny, right? So that was in the 90s. And then back in 2009, Bright Star was another one that has some like other known quantities. It's been a minute since she's like done directed like a big film in this capacity. So she's done it before, but not for a while. And then in terms of the cast, okay, again, we're back to some household names. You've seen them before on the channel. We have Benedict Cumberbatch, or whatever crazy name you want to make up for him. He's I guess you call him the lead? I mean, he's the lead along with several other actors. You would also know Discount Meth Damon. We have Jesse Plemons over here, who seems to play different variations of the same guy, but always manages to just awkwardly play it just right. Like, it shouldn't work, but it does. Kirsten Dunst also has a very valuable role in this film, an essential core role if you ask me. And lastly, I'm not familiar with him, but it was how do you say it? Cody Smith McPhee? Was that it? Something like that. Cody Smith McPhee. I can't even read my own handwriting. He plays a very interesting character, and he plays it well, so there's that. But yeah, no complaints about any of the cast per se. Yeah, that's directing, who stars in it, that's the general basics out of the way. Let's get into the meat and potatoes here. Going into Power of the Dog, I knew two things, and two things only. I knew that it was a slow burn film, or a lot of people kept considering it a slow burn, and that it was a Western. That's it. But I kept hearing enormously positive reviews. Most everybody that talked about this film, or talks about it, likes it, gives it accolades, calls it like, I mean, it's enough so that's a Best Picture nominee, right? I went in like wanting to like it, right? I personally didn't like it. I don't think it's bad. I think it's a very good film. A borderline, on its own artistic merits, a borderline fantastic film. Just to me, I thought it was good. It was pretty good film, but I did not enjoy the narrative direction it ended up taking. And I'm not going to spoil it. I don't want to ruin it for you if you haven't seen it, but if you have seen it, you probably know what I'm talking about. Visually, this film is absolutely gorgeous. Some of the best like shots of just planes and vistas, and the way that the shots are composed in this film, the cinematography is insane. Like, there's so many great silhouette shots, character shots, landscape, medium. Like, it is crafted very well. It's so well directed. It's so well shot. Just visually speaking, if you're a fan of like that aesthetic of like the Wild West and the ranch, and just like not like rootin' tootin' cowboy shooting, because not a single gun is even brandished in this film, I don't think, but just the aesthetic of like, you know, rancher out in the West and herding cattle, and that's kind of how life is, and gonna roll into town a little late and gonna go get some grub and bring these longhorns back to the like, if you like all that, you're gonna in love with this film. Not to mention the soundtrack. Oh my god, this soundtrack is one of the most anxiety-inducing, like cerebral and unnerving. Tonally, it shifts with the movie. It blends into it. Characters have, like, some of the soundtrack is diegetically brought to you by the characters in a very specific way that I won't spoil too much to. I mean, you kind of see it in the trailer a little bit, but the soundtrack is it's in the sense like how It Follows, like, just brings that sense of dread and 80s feel to it. So this does with like the West, and like just not even, it's not like swooping orchestrations, it's just like you're just like, oh, like you feel like something's wrong, like the other shoe's gonna drop, like something just isn't right, something is wrong with this world, and that's what the soundtrack brings you, and it nails the theme. It's a weird contrast between the beauty of the world presented in this film and the soundtrack that then evokes the emotion from you as you're watching. Acting is killer. Very intense scenes throughout. It's definitely, like, again, it even says it in Netflix, it's like a drama, western, slow burn. It is definitely a slow burn, but that does not mean that it is not acted masterfully by all the cast that are involved, playing to the strengths of their abilities. Their characters are being portrayed well, dynamics, tension, it's all there. No complaints regarding the acting at all. This one wasn't like a pro or a con, just a note. I know I keep using the word slow burn. Don't get me wrong. I don't, if a movie is good, I don't care if it's a slow burn. I don't want you to think that because I'm calling this movie a slow burn, that means it's inherently bad. It's not the equation I'm trying to produce here. It just happens to be that I wasn't a fan, and it also happened to be a slow burn. But getting into that, the cons, I suppose. So I get what the film is going for. I 100% understand. I understood the film. Nothing was lost on me. It's a meditative drama that focuses on the West and masculinity. Other themes are touched as well. There's heavy symbolism throughout. I understood what they were trying to go for. And for the most part, it worked. There was a moment halfway through where I realized what was going on in the narrative, and I was like, oh, that is insanely interesting. I can't wait till we dive more into that and where that's going to pan out from there. Did we dive more into those concepts? A bit, yes. We got more character development. I started to see some arcs happening, like in my mind. I was like, man, this is adding more layers to the narrative. I'm curious to see where the story goes. By the end of the movie took a direction. I understand why it took that direction. It makes sense why the movie took the direction that it did and why the characters ended up where they ended up and did what they did. But I wasn't a fan of how it kind of panned out. It didn't satisfy me. I get it, but it was not my preference. It is a decent story. I thought it was going to turn into a fantastic story halfway through, and some may disagree with me and say that it was. Again, I get it. I feel like I might have to be on the defensive here because so many people like this movie, but like there were certain characters, at least two characters I can think of, that I would have loved to have seen a different arc for both of them. And one of them just kind of like is a character throughout the film, and that's it. They don't really like develop. And the other one, like, you have their character baseline, what they are, what they've established, and then you start to see like a turn, and then you start to see an arc formating. You start to see the formation of an arc, and I guess you might call it an arc by the end of it. Like, it ends one way for them for sure, but I would have loved to have seen more character, maybe even character growth and examination, or like a change. I don't know. Like, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri did a very good job of giving you some characters that you thought, like, you felt one way about very strongly, but by the end of it, you kind of changed your tune. At least I did. The main note that I put on this was the narrative payoff is highly symbolic and meaningful, but not worth it to me on a personal level. that's kind of the general idea of this film, is that I recognize it for its artistic talent and the effort that went into this film. I think as a film, period, it's a pretty great film. I think that to some that liked the direction the narrative took, it was fantastic, maybe even a borderline masterpiece. I could see in the right light how that argument could be made. Maybe if I even watched it a second time, I would feel differently. But as it stands, Power of the Dog I thought it was good. Fantastic, like, pieces that are all going together, and almost everything comes together very well. But the narrative just, my bias kicks in. I didn't like how the narrative panned out, and because of that, it dramatically and drastically affects how I feel about the film as a whole, which sucks, honestly, because I wanted to like this film, and like I keep saying, there are aspects of this film that I love and really enjoy, but it didn't do it for me. Not just personal preference, just didn't go for it. My rating, and most fair I can be, as with all films that I review, this is half viewing it as a film, period, and half on my personal enjoyment. So Power of the Dog, I give a pretty high 3 out of 5. And it pains me to say that, but a pretty high 3 out of 5. I don't know, man. Maybe go see it in theaters. If you enjoy any of what I mentioned before, you might like the visual aesthetic of the film, and seeing it in the theater could ultimately be a payoff. Hard to say, but I don't know, man. Some people are gonna like it, some people aren't. For me, I don't know if I could honestly recommend it to be worth your time, because it's only like 2 hours and 5 minutes. So 2 hours, like, I don't know. I've seen worse films that are longer. I've seen better films that are longer. I don't think that it should be a Best Picture nominee. Then again, I don't think Don't Look Up should be a Best Picture nominee either, but here we are with this weird year from the Academy. Correct me below, give your own opinion about it, but at the end of the day, that's where I stand. I keep repeating myself, but I want to communicate. Power of the Dog is not a bad movie. I personally just didn't like it, and that's only because of the story. Visually, looks great. Acting, killer. Soundtrack, killer. All the right ingredients for a perfect storm. The narrative even starts to take a turn in a direction that I thought was going to be what was going to be ultimately a great payoff, but for me personally it was not, and I just didn't like how the movie went and ended by the end of it. But it doesn't make it a bad film, it just means that I didn't enjoy it, and that brings down the score dramatically. So Power of the Dog, that's what I thought about it, and that's my review. Let me know what you thought if you want. Otherwise, stay tuned, because a lot of movies are coming up, and I got a lot of catching up to do. As always, it's turning into a very stacked year for films, it turns out. So thank you so much for what's a weight off my chest, oddly enough. I'm worried about what the fallout's gonna be like, but it's still a weight off my chest. So thank you guys and gals so much for watching, as always, and stay tuned with the next episode of whatever movie I review. I would have worn a cowboy hat for this one, but I'm so disappointed in myself. I don't own a cowboy hat. I don't want like a 10-gallon cowboy hat, but like something tasteful, like a Dutch Van der Linde kind of hat. Anyway, thank you so much, and goodbye, travelers.